Hello and welcome to the January Supper Club. We are so glad to be here and continuing our series on the scripture and poetry and around supper, I think is what we've said. We heard from a number of you about last month's supper clubs that you really enjoyed doing the scripture and adding a poem, that I guess the conversations were rich. So we're really glad to hear that. And this month, we are continuing the narrative of Jesus's life. Last month doing the Annunciation. This month we're doing the Epiphany, which means the coming of the Magi. This text is taken from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, and it's going to be a great conversation and a great poem to be companioning this story. Let me start with a few thoughts.
Yeah, please,
okay. This story about the Magi, we have all sorts of ideas about the three kings or the three wise men or the three astrologers, that every creche, nativity set has the three kings and all the animals and all the, and the shepherds and the angels, like it's a party in the stable. But really, we need to pay attention to the text. We're encouraging you to read closely and really listen to the text with fresh ears, because I think so many of our ideas about this story come from hymns or poetry or children's books or
movies.
Creches. Exactly. And so if we pay attention to a close reading of this story, I think we might hear something new. Yeah. Tell us about this story, some historical context.
A little historical context, and that this happens later, after the birth, right? As you were saying, like in our creches, they're kind of smashed together, or in our pageants, but this happens a bit later. And why that's important is because the Magi see the star, which was significant in their role as astrologers, as part of the priestly class in this part of the world, and kind of what's Persia, and they're traveling too. So the Magi are traveling from the east, to arrive in Bethlehem, and so their role is significant, both because of the star and their role as astrologers and the priestly class in the East. Secondly, they are bringing gifts that have symbolic importance, right, in the historical context of that time. So, of course, we know gold, which symbolically represents the royalty, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And the second one about frankincense, we know kind of already that that's largely symbolic around a ritual, around prayer and temple in that Eastern context, right? So these symbolic gifts are recognizing sort of who Jesus is.
The identity of Jesus.
And the third one's a little tricky because we know gold and frankincense more in our everyday lives, but we don't use myrrh very much. But myrrh was used as an embalming spice, which is a sort of evocative or echoing. Foreshadowing is the right word.
Foreshadowing
for Jesus' death. And so as you read these, think about the gifts having symbolic references to who Jesus is, right? Not just the gifts, what they were, it's really what they said about.
Sure, because that's what Matthew, or the writer of Matthew, is trying to say is early on in the Gospels, they're saying, who is this child, right? And so this text of these 12 verses are pointing at something important about this child, right? Thank you. May I read it?
Let's read it.
Okay,
Let's read it.
So listen with new ears. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. Just quickly, a couple things that I noticed this time in reading it is the collision of these special men, or I'm assuming men, we don't know exactly, but these magi who come into Jerusalem clearly with probably, their people, their entourage, right? Because all Jerusalem with the king were disturbed, right? They were so it made a commotion and disrupted the empire. Right, that something in the powers were shaken that day. I think that's really worth noting. And of course, I love the last line in this story. Having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. Like they were transformed in seeing this child, and they knew something was different, and they were not going to endanger this child. So they went by another route. There's a lot there that could be preached on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Well, should we move to the poem? Yeah, let's move to the poem. So our poem is by the poet William Carlos Williams. Many of you may know of him. So he's born in the late 1800s, I think 1883, and died in 1963. Born, his mother Puerto Rican and his father English, but he was born in New Jersey, and so he writes his poetry from a bilingual and a bicultural worldview. He's also a physician and is known to have done house calls, and so a lot of his poetry comes out of the everyday lived experience of being a physician that's really with folks in their homes or in the community. And really
almost like a country doctor. So he's doing all the things doctors do.
Yeah. So this is The Gift by William Carlos Williams. As the wise men of old brought gifts, guided by a star to the humble birthplace of the God of love, the devils, as an old print shows, retreated in confusion. What could a baby know of gold ornaments, or frankincense and myrrh, of priestly robes and devout genuflections? But the imagination knows all stories before they are told, and knows the truth of this one past all defection. The rich gifts, so unsuitable for a child, though devoutly proffered, stood for all that love can bring. The men were old, how could they know of a mother's needs or a child's appetite? But as they kneeled, the child was fed. They saw it and gave praise. A miracle had taken place, hard gold to love, a mother's milk. Before their wandering eyes, the ass brayed, the cattle lowed. It was their nature. All men by their nature give praise. It is all they can do. The very devils by their flight give praise. What is death besides this? Nothing. The wise men came with gifts and bowed down to worship this perfection. It's so good.
It is so good, and it so fills out that text.
Yeah, it does.
I don't know if we want to really say anything about this poem, because I think there's a lot there that these groups can talk about themselves. Don't you think?
We shouldn't influence or shape them.
I think there's a lot there.
Yeah. So I'm curious what arises in your conversations.
Yeah. I think be sure to work with both of these texts. We encourage you. There really are only two questions. The first one is, what do you come to this story with? The presuppositions, the mythologies that you entertain about the story of the Magi. What does that look like for you? And that's the first question. What have you already thought about this story? And secondly, what did you hear with new ears in this story today and in the conversation with your dinner partners? I guess the third one is, what are the images, words, metaphors that come out of the Carlos Williams poem that inform and converse with the text? Yeah. And anything else?
Well, and we hope that you enjoy each other's company. You know, supper clubs are about getting to know each other and building community, as well as reflecting on our spiritual lives through these texts. But we hope you have a great dinner together, enjoying each other's company, getting to know each other, and may you have a blessed epiphany.
Yeah. Don't forget to pray before you eat.
Bless the food. All right.
Have a great night.
Have a great night.